There's a quiet moment most men miss, the instant a woman decides whether you feel safe, solid, and grounded, or whether you feel like work. And by the end of this conversation, you'll understand why one simple refusal changes that decision more than any charm ever could. If this speaks to you, stay with me, and if you value calm, honest psychology like this, consider liking and subscribing. It helps this work reach men who need it. I want to start by gently correcting a common misunderstanding. Attraction is not created by doing more. It's created by removing what shouldn't be there. Smart men don't impress women by proving their worth over and over. They impress by refusing to abandon themselves. That refusal is felt immediately, even if it's never spoken out loud. The first thing emotionally intelligent men refuse is the role of emotional performer. Many men were taught, directly or indirectly, that they must entertain, reassure, explain, and emotionally manage every interaction. If there's silence, they fill it. If there's distance, they chase it. If there's uncertainty, they over-clarify. On the surface, this looks like effort. Underneath, it communicates anxiety. From a psychological perspective, constant emotional performance signals that your inner state depends on her reactions. And when a man's emotional center lives outside of him, a woman doesn't feel relaxed. She feels responsible. Not because she wants power, but because the nervous system reads imbalance as risk. Smart men refuse this pattern. They don't withhold warmth, they don't play games, they simply allow space, they let pauses breathe, they don't rush to rescue conversations from discomfort. They understand that calm presence is more regulating than perfect words. Here's the subtle truth most men were never told. A woman doesn't feel drawn to the man who keeps things lively. She feels drawn to the man who feels settled, settled in himself, settled in his values, settled enough that connection can unfold without pressure. This refusal doesn't make you distant, it makes you trustworthy. Because when you stop performing, your attention becomes intentional instead of anxious. Your words carry weight. Your silence feels grounded, not punishing. And your presence communicates, I am here by choice, not by fear of losing you. That message is deeply attractive, not because it dominates, but because it stabilizes. As we continue, you'll see how this same inner refusal shows up in other areas men unknowingly give away. And one of them, in particular, quietly decides whether attraction grows or slowly fades. For now, notice this. The strongest signal you send isn't what you say or do. It's what you no longer feel compelled to prove. The second thing smart men refuse is over-explaining themselves. This one is subtle because it often disguises itself as honesty, kindness, or good communication. Many men believe that if they just explain their intentions clearly enough, misunderstandings will disappear and attraction will stabilize. Psychologically, the opposite often happens. Over-explaining usually comes from a hidden fear, the fear of being misjudged, misunderstood, or quietly rejected. So a man adds more context, more reasoning, more justification. He explains why he said something, why he needs space, why he feels the way he feels, why his decision makes sense. And while clarity is healthy, excessive justification is not clarity. It's self-defense. From a female psychological perspective, when a man explains himself too much, it sends an unconscious signal that he doesn't fully trust his own authority over his choices. And if he doesn't trust himself, her nervous system struggles to trust him either. Smart men refuse to negotiate their inner compass. They understand that confidence isn't loud and it isn't rigid. It's quiet certainty. When they speak, they don't feel the need to convince. They state, they listen. They adjust if necessary, but not from pressure. This doesn't mean being cold or dismissive. It means understanding the emotional difference between sharing and defending. Sharing is open. Defending is tense. Women feel that difference immediately. Here's something important most men never hear. Attraction weakens when a woman feels like she has to approve of your reasoning for you to stand by your choices. Not because she wants control, but because emotional safety requires leadership of the self. A man who collapses under the weight of potential disapproval feels unpredictable. Not dangerous, but unanchored. Refusing to over-explain doesn't mean refusing communication. It means trusting that your values don't need a courtroom-level argument to exist. A grounded man can say, "This doesn't work for me," without turning it into a dissertation. He can say, "I need time," without apologizing for having needs. He can say, "I see this differently," without trying to win. And that calm restraint does something powerful. It creates polarity without pressure. It creates respect without force. It allows attraction to grow because it isn't being begged to stay alive. When a man speaks from certainty rather than anxiety, his words land deeper. They don't rush past her defenses. They settle. As you listen, notice if any part of you learned that love required explanation, justification, or constant clarity. Because in the next truth, we'll explore something even more ingrained, something many men were praised for, yet quietly punished by attraction for giving away. The third thing smart men refuse is chasing emotional inconsistency. This is one of the most painful patterns men fall into, because it often begins with hope. One day, the connection feels warm, engaged, alive. The next, it feels distant, distracted, uncertain. And instead of stepping back to observe, many men lean forward. They try harder. They send longer messages. They offer more reassurance. They attempt to restore the version of her that felt close. Psychologically, this creates an imbalance that quietly erodes attraction. From a female emotional standpoint, inconsistency doesn't automatically mean disinterest. Sometimes it reflects internal conflict, stress, or unresolved emotional patterns. But when a man chases that inconsistency, something important shifts. He stops being a steady presence and becomes a regulator of her emotions. And that role is not attractive. It's exhausting. Smart men refuse to become emotional stabilizers for someone who hasn't chosen stability herself. This refusal isn't punishment. It isn't withdrawal as manipulation. It's discernment. A grounded man notices patterns without dramatizing them. He doesn't rush to fix what isn't clearly broken. He allows space to reveal truth. Because consistency reveals character and time reveals intention. Here's the part most men were never taught. When you chase emotional inconsistency, you train the dynamic to revolve around her fluctuations instead of shared alignment. And over time, attraction fades, not because you weren't good enough, but because you abandoned your own emotional rhythm. Women are deeply sensitive to emotional pacing. They feel when a man speeds up to match their confusion or slows down to accommodate their withdrawal. And while this can feel flattering at first, it eventually creates discomfort. The connection loses its grounding. Smart men keep their internal tempo steady. They don't disappear. They don't punish silence with silence. They remain respectful, present, and emotionally consistent themselves. But they refuse to chase mixed signals. They understand that clarity isn't created by pursuit, it's revealed by patience. This kind of steadiness does something powerful. It creates contrast, and contrast brings awareness. A woman begins to feel her own inconsistency more clearly when it's no longer being absorbed by a man's over-effort. Not because he's teaching her a lesson, but because he's no longer shielding her from the natural feedback of the dynamic. And in many cases, this is where attraction either deepens or dissolves honestly. Both outcomes are healthy, because the goal of emotional intelligence isn't to keep someone at all costs. It's to create a connection where both nervous systems can relax. As we continue, there's one more refusal that quietly separates men who are endlessly trying from men who are deeply chosen. And it has nothing to do with confidence tricks, only with self-respect. The fourth thing smart men refuse is sacrificing their values to avoid conflict. Many men were taught that being easy to love means saying yes to everything, smoothing over disagreements, and putting the other person's comfort above their own. On the surface, this seems considerate, but what it really communicates is fear. Fear of disapproval, fear of confrontation, fear of loss. And when fear drives your decisions, attraction quietly erodes. Women, like all humans, sense when a man bends too much. It's rarely conscious. They don't sit down and think, he didn't enforce his boundary, so he's weak. What they do feel, on a nervous system level, is imbalance. They feel the tension in the dynamic, the subtle pressure that says, I am responsible for his sense of self. And no one, male or female, finds that magnetic. Smart men refuse to negotiate their core values for temporary comfort. This doesn't mean they are rigid or unkind. It means they understand that real respect, real attraction, arises when a man lives his truth, even when it's uncomfortable. It's about choosing integrity over appeasement, presence over panic, self-respect over anxiety. When a man holds a boundary calmly, without apology or aggression, it communicates stability. It signals that he is not a man to be swayed by every emotional wave. It shows that he values himself, which paradoxically allows the other person to relax into the relationship rather than being constantly tested. Here's a subtle truth most men miss. A woman is often drawn not to the man who never causes friction, but to the man who navigates friction with composure. She wants to feel safe in his presence, not safe because she has to manage him. By refusing to compromise his values for approval, a man cultivates that safety effortlessly. Another layer is internal. When a man sacrifices his principles for comfort, he sends himself a message: I am not enough as I am. That self-perception seeps into interactions, often as nervousness, over-explaining, or subtle people-pleasing. Women sense this, not consciously, but physiologically. Confidence built on compromise doesn't last. Confidence built on authentic self-alignment does. Smart men understand that boundaries aren't limitations, they are frameworks for connection. They refuse to shrink themselves to maintain a sense of control in the relationship. They let their standards, values, and priorities guide their decisions. And when they do, they stop chasing approval and start attracting respect, attention, and genuine interest. This refusal, like the others, may feel counterintuitive at first. You may wonder if standing firm pushes people away, but paradoxically, it does the opposite. It draws in the people who resonate with your authenticity and filters out the ones who do not. And this is where attraction deepens naturally, not through games or effort, but through self-possession. If you felt uneasy following these truths, that's normal. It's your nervous system adjusting to a different paradigm, one where calm, intentional refusal shapes connection more powerfully than endless effort ever could. Beyond these 4 refusals, there's a deeper layer that often goes unnoticed, but it's what separates men who are simply liked from men who are truly magnetic. This is the refusal to seek validation through attention. Many men fall into the trap of constantly checking for signs, likes, texts, reactions, approvals. Every response becomes a measure of worth. And while it's normal to want connection, when your self-esteem depends on external feedback, it subtly changes the dynamic. The interaction is no longer about 2 people connecting. It becomes a transaction of reassurance. Women, consciously or unconsciously, feel this shift. They sense when a man's energy is tethered to their approval, and what might feel like care, interest, or engagement at first can quickly feel heavy, anxious, or exhausting. Attraction is rarely built on need. It is built on security, internal, unwavering security. Smart men refuse to make their emotional stability conditional on someone else's attention. They understand that self-validation is magnetic. It doesn't mean ignoring her or being aloof. It means bringing presence, value, and clarity into every interaction without clinging to outcomes. When a man values himself enough to not need constant affirmation, it creates polarity, the kind of energy that draws people in rather than pushes them away. Think of it like this: a man who always chases signals teaches a woman to doubt. A man who refuses to chase, while remaining engaged and present, teaches clarity. He teaches that his life has structure, purpose, and direction, elements women instinctively recognize as strength. This refusal also protects emotional health. When your self-worth isn't tied to fluctuating attention, you maintain calm in uncertainty. You can step back without panic, stay grounded during distance, and approach connection with curiosity rather than desperation. That kind of equilibrium is rare, and women respond to it instinctively. Another key point, refusing to seek validation allows men to set intentional boundaries in every interaction, from casual conversations to serious decisions. Because their sense of self is intact, they no longer overcompensate or make choices based on fear of loss. Their choices are deliberate, aligned, and attractive. So, if you've noticed patterns of chasing approval or over-investing in responses, this is your signal to pause. The path toward magnetic presence is rarely about adding effort. It's about removing dependency, removing the compulsion to perform, explain, chase, or bend. And as you integrate this, you begin to notice a profound change. Women stop being unpredictable forces and start being mirrors reflecting your grounded energy. That shift, subtle as it feels, is the cornerstone of deep attraction. In the next section, we'll explore how all these refusals interact to create a presence that's irresistible without trying. A presence that communicates, quietly but powerfully, that you are complete, capable, and intentional. When you combine these refusals, the refusal to perform emotionally, to over-explain, to chase inconsistency, to sacrifice your values, and to seek validation, you create something far more powerful than any tactic or line ever could, a presence of authenticity. Authenticity isn't flashy. It doesn't need constant affirmation. It doesn't demand attention, but it carries a weight, a calm authority, and a subtle tension that naturally draws women in. It's the quiet energy of a man who is fully anchored in himself, whose emotions, decisions, and boundaries are aligned with his inner truth. And women, at a subconscious level, feel it immediately. Here's why this works psychologically. Attraction isn't just about chemistry or physical appeal. It's about emotional resonance. Women are wired to sense reliability, confidence, and internal regulation. When a man is emotionally consistent, clear in his values, and secure in himself, he communicates safety, not in a controlling way, but in a stabilizing way. That safety triggers comfort, curiosity, and desire all at once. This presence also creates polarity. Polarity is the invisible pull that makes a connection magnetic. It doesn't arise from showing off or being dominant. It arises from self-possession. When a man refuses to over-explain, perform, chase, or bend for approval, he naturally stands apart from the sea of men who are constantly seeking validation. That contrast alone draws attention, and not superficial attention, but genuine, lasting attraction. Another key element is patience. Smart men don't rush outcomes or force reactions. They understand that a relationship, connection, or attraction develops naturally when both parties operate from authenticity. They don't need to manipulate attention. They let their calm, grounded energy do the work. Women notice this. They sense when a man is unshakable in himself, and it creates a pull far stronger than charm or words ever could. And this isn't about being cold, distant, or unkind. In fact, the paradox is that when you refuse these patterns, you become warmer, more present, and more engaging, because you're no longer distracted by fear, overthinking, or compulsion. Your interactions are deliberate. Your energy is available. Your attention is real, not anxious. By internalizing these refusals, you step into a different mode of attraction, one that feels effortless, natural, and psychologically compelling. Women are drawn not to your efforts, but to your alignment. They feel it, and it changes the dynamic in ways that charm alone never could. This is the kind of presence that lasts, the kind that women remember, the kind that transforms connections into meaningful attraction, without games, manipulation, or over-effort. And in the next section, we'll explore the subtle behaviors that can undermine this presence, even in men who understand these truths, and how to protect it to ensure lasting attraction. Even when a man understands these 4 refusals and builds a grounded presence, there are subtle behaviors that can quietly erode attraction, and most men don't even realize they're doing them. These are not dramatic mistakes. They're micro patterns that signal insecurity, neediness, or misalignment with self. One of the most common is over-apologizing for being yourself. When a man constantly softens his stance, hedges his opinions, or apologizes for his boundaries, it undermines everything he's built. Women don't need a perfect man. They need a man who is steady, intentional, and aligned. Apologies for your core self communicate uncertainty, and uncertainty disrupts attraction. Another quiet danger is over-communicating reassurance. Reassuring a woman constantly, texting to confirm interest, explaining why she matters, or over-answering her questions may feel caring, but it subtly signals dependence. When your validation comes from her reactions, it undermines the calm, grounded energy that draws women in. Attraction thrives on confidence and self-possession, not anxiety masked as care. Equally important is ignoring your own priorities to accommodate hers. Men who bend too much, adjust schedules compulsively, or suppress their own goals to maintain comfort in a relationship gradually lose their presence. Women feel this as instability, even if they don't consciously name it. Attraction is strongest when a man honors himself as much as he honors her. The final subtle pitfall is reacting impulsively to emotional shifts. Whether it's withdrawal, silence, or mood changes, many men respond reflexively, chasing, pleading, or over-explaining. This reflex communicates that your internal state depends on her behavior. The moment you anchor yourself instead, refusing to be swayed by unpredictability, your energy becomes magnetic. These behaviors are small, but they compound over time. Each one chips away at the very foundation built by refusing to perform, over-explain, chase inconsistency, compromise values, or seek external validation. The key is vigilance, awareness of when your actions reflect fear, need, or overdependence rather than deliberate choice. When you cultivate awareness and respond with intention rather than impulse, attraction flourishes naturally. Women are drawn to men who embody calm, certainty, and self-respect. They respond to presence, not effort, to alignment, not performance, to refusal rooted in integrity, not stubbornness. At the end of the day, smart men understand that attraction is less about what you do and more about what you refuse to compromise within yourself. Each refusal shapes the energy you carry, the dynamic you create, and the respect and desire you naturally inspire. And that, quietly but powerfully, is how you become the kind of man women are drawn to, without chasing, pleading, or performing.